Okay, welcome everyone. Today is February 12th, 2016, and we are on a conference call today, a webinar today with Lois Holzman, who has spent the week with us on our Ning platform. Let me just talk about that for a minute. Again, this is Dawn Dole from the Taos Institute. The Taos Institute is sponsoring this week in dialogue with the author. This is our fourth time that we've offered this program, A Week in Dialogue with the Author, which is a free program for a week of conversation virtually with the author of a particular article or book. And then we close the week out with this webinar. And we're really excited about today as we're talking about The Overweight Brain by Lois Holzman. The Taos Institute is a nonprofit global organization. We are an educational organization, and we have conferences and workshops. We have a publication arm. We have a PhD program, a master's program, certificate programs, distance learning programs, all kinds of things. And the whole focus of our organization is to look at, explore, develop constructionist theory and practice. And as we look at constructionist theory and practice as locating the source of meaning and value and action through relational processes. So that's what we're really about. We're looking at the relational processes that make positive change possible throughout the world, in our organizations, in our schools, in our communities, in our families, with each other, etc. So welcome. I'm really thrilled that you're here today and that you were able to participate this week online. The Taos Institute has our regular website, which is filled with free books. We call the World Share Book Series. We have other publications. We have free manuscripts and articles for downloading, lots of resources. So I hope you spend some time on our regular website at taosinstitute.net. And then this week you spent time with Lois and the group on our Ning platform, which is an online community space for dialogue. And we have lots of different conversations and topics happening there. It also is a free community to join, and I am pleased that you've decided to join it and hope you will engage in other conversations as well. And you will see Emily Gray on the call today. She's our coordinator for the Ning online community platform. If you ever have issues or questions, you may email her. Her information's on the website. And so now let's get to our call. Today we are talking with Lois, and Lois is the co-director or co-founder and director of the Eastside Institute for Group and Short-Term Psychotherapy. And this is in New York. And Lois, we are just thrilled that you were with us this week and that you've shared your book, The Overweight Brain. And I think the conversation that we're about to engage in for the next 45 minutes to an hour is just really great. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And remember to keep yourself on mute and then use the chat feature as needed. And Lois, I'm going to turn it over to you and get started.
Okay. Thank you, Dawn. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's late morning, mid-morning for me. I also want to thank you all for participating today. And I think that most of you participated during the week in this wonderful, lively romp that we had. Or as somebody put it, it was like being at the dinner table with a very, very large family where there's 20 conversations going on. All of them absolutely delightful. So welcome. I just want to give you a little bit of background. So many of the things that Dawn said in introducing the Taos Institute apply to the Eastside Institute as well. We are an educational center, a research center, a therapeutics training center for not constructionist ideas. They are obviously included in ours because we're a center for the development and promotion of alternative and radical and radically humanistic approaches to human development and learning and community building. And so we share many of the kinds of activities that Taos offers people, as well as a basic philosophy. For us, the human capacity to play and to perform the way people in the theater perform, which is astonishing in the sense that what they are is both who they are. If I was on stage in some theatrical production, I would be Lois Holzman and I would be the character I was playing. And I would be both who I am and who I am not. And my studies of the work of the Soviet psychologist Lev Vygotsky, who lived in the early 20th century, have showed me and inspired me and my co-founder of the Institute and mentor Fred Newman to realize that performing or playing is how you grow and how you learn. Because babies, like the person on the stage, who is both who he or she is and other, babies are who they are and who they're not, because parents relate to them as Vygotsky says, a head taller than they are. Relating to people as who they're going to be. So we relate to a babbling baby as the baby, but also as someone who could talk when they can't talk. And that's exactly how they learn to talk and grow into the amazing things that human beings are by virtue of their capacity for language. So that's something that we promote. We began in the, excuse me, in the 70s. And so we've been around for quite a long time. We're an independent institution, as Taos is. We're not affiliated with a university, although Taos is now with its PhD programs. And we offer training and study programs for people around the world, both online and residency programs. And you could go to thesideinstitute.org and find out a ton of things about our work and many, many things to download as well. So Fred Newman and I wrote many academic books, putting forth postmodernist ideas, critical psychology ideas, this methodology of human development and growth and community building through organizing groups of people to create environments where they could play and perform, be a head taller, grow, become activists in their lives. And a few years ago, I started a blog. I wanted to see if I could develop another voice, a popular voice, if you will, a voice that was able, that didn't water down any of the ideas that were foundational for all of the practices that we engaged in, Fred Newman and me and our colleagues, but also increasingly around the world that people were being very responsive to. And I often speak with young people from the poor communities through the All Stars Project, which is very close to my heart and something that I have participated in growing and sharing around the world. And with speaking with adults who are across the spectrum of education, and bringing a philosophical, playful approach to creating dialogue, and found that people were so responsive. So I said, okay, I want to see if I can develop a writing voice that would reach people. And as someone online said during this week, I was so thrilled I didn't have to read each paragraph 3 times, because I asked in the book, how am I doing? So I decided to start this book, The Overweight Brain, How Our Obsession with Knowing Keeps Us from Getting Smart Enough to Make a Better World, and to put it online chapter by chapter and welcome comments, welcome graphic designs, cartoons, whatever, people to write it kind of playfully together with others. And so This opportunity this week that Taos has given me to do that with all of you is just invaluable. I have learned so much. I did invite people to put online some animations, because somewhere in this conversation we started to talk about the meaning despots and the authoritarianism of people who say they have the right meaning. And then there was this gradual increase of or other kinds of animated figures. And so maybe somebody will pick up on that. So the book, I hope you've noticed that I'm a little bit less than halfway through. If you read the introduction, where I lay out all the chapters I had planned to write. And so your enthusiasm and your wanderings off of what I've written and improvisational conversation is encouragement for me to keep going and write the rest of the chapters. I assume there are some people on this call who were not in the dialogue and maybe are trying to catch up on reading. So I thought I'd give a 1 or 2 minute summary of the book so far. So what I've tried to do is lay out that the ideology, if you will, of knowing and the way it's institutionalized in almost all the institutions of our lives, schooling, the workplace, our own psychological state. We often feel like we have to know before we make thinking. Is failing, is completely failing us with every single social problem that there is, and just as a way to live.
I haven't heard anything from the Puerto Ricans, guys, right?
I'm sorry? Somebody said something? Anyway, I heard something, but I don't know what the person said. Sorry. So I'm challenging that living and finding solutions to social problems and any kind of progress in the world, I'm challenging that requires knowing. I introduce in the first few chapters 4 people, 4 men, in fact, who have been influential on my development and my life. One is my father, Murray. The second was Fred Newman, my mentor and co-founder of the Institute. And then there were 2 people that I never met in person, Lev Vygotsky, the Soviet psychologist, and Ludwig Wittgenstein, the Austrian philosopher. I introduce those, and then I go on to kind of deconstruct knowing. What is it? And one of our conversations online during the week was right at the heart of that, in that there is something called a piece of knowledge, right? And then there's the knowing paradigm, the ideology, the worldview, the way of living that takes it, that socializes us to, that's how to be in the world, to discover what there is to know about it. So what I'm challenging is that. And of course, within that, there will always be opportunities and people to go to and books to go to, and the everything we want to know, in some sense, is available at our computer. So the question is, why do we have to live our lives to keep acquiring, quote, so-called knowledge, and that it may not do us service? And in fact, it may be disruptive. In that, I'm talking in particular about causality, temporality, dualism, dichotomy, that these are some of the primary tools of knowing, turning the unity of process and product into product. Whether even when we're so involved in the process of creating something, for example, an improvisational comedy group or a conversation that we're having, or creating a piece of art together or music, you leave it, and what are you left with? The product. It's very, very ingrained in how we're socialized in our culture to forget process and focus on product. I then go on in the 2 chapters you have. What I'm trying to do is take different areas. The ones that are finished are schools and psychology. And I plan to go on to science and health and medicine, and then to the media and to politics. And as the book is conceptualized, the alternative to knowing, which for me and my colleagues is performing and playing, is kind of at the end of the book, which isn't written yet. And one of the things I want to know is if this is the best way to do it, or if I should be rewriting and trying to integrate much more of the actual methodology that I am putting forth within the chapters. And nobody has to answer that now, but I would like to come back to that. So some of the themes they're not even themes, some of the conversational threads, the direction that people were going in. And I was very, very pleased that so much of it was playful, and so much of it was interconnected and interactive, and people got to know each other and by creating this conversation together. As I said, one of them was on knowing and the knowing paradigm. And well, I get this and I think I'm so for it and it's wonderful and da-da-da, but if I want to know how to do X, I'm going to go to the expert. And to me, that's not a conflict, but that's something to keep exploring if people want to. We had this lovely interchange about writing and the difference between thinking expressed, not the difference, but thinking, the Vygotskian brilliant notion that thought is not expressed in the word. Words are not closed off a rack. You have a thought and you try to find the right word and say, no, that's not right, I'm going to take this one. But rather that thought and thinking and speaking are a unity in which the speaking transforms the thought. And from that and questions about that, people started to speak about their writing voice versus their speaking voice, and what is that like? And I was suggesting that you have to let your words have an impact, not just on others, but on you. So I think that takes the idea of relationality, not only to others, but relationality to oneself and one's process. So that's possibly another theme. So I'm putting some stuff out, but I want to hear what you all want to talk about. A final topic I think that came up quite a bit was, what is there to do? For example, given the institutionalization, given what psychology in particular is like, and how it teaches us as graduate students and faculty's positions of having to teach things, what the practice is like and what it does to the general public. What are we to do? How can we fight that? So those are some of the themes that came up for me that I saw in the lovely, wonderful conversation that we were having. And I'd like to open it up to everybody now for comments, questions, pursual, creation.
So what we'd like you to do is, if you don't have your webcam on and you want to jump on the webcam, that would be fine now. And also use the mute button or unmute to jump in. You can kind of raise your hand in the webcam if you want to say a comment. You can also use the chat feature to jump in the conversation. I guess I would have a question, as people were looking at the conversation online this week. what were some of the highlights for you as you were reading people's posts and comments and sharing on the what were some of the highlights for you, some of the aha moments?
People are so silent.
Hi, Lois.
Hi.
Hello to everyone from Calgary.
Lois.
Oh, Barbara, Art.
We have Barbara, Tom, myself, Monica, and Gina.
Wonderful. Great
Yeah.
to see you.
So I'm curious, given the location I'm in and Brittany's in, we've had lots of talks about sort of envisioning a graduate education for the future, right? That sort of piece around, what the alternative would be that you're going to write at the very end. We kind of wanted to bring it to the right now and discuss it, and we couldn't get to a place where we sort of had a sense of how to go about doing that. What would the developmental, radically humanistic graduate education, graduate program in psychology look like, right? And what are the thoughts that come up for you around that?
Well, my first thought is it would look a lot like what Taos Institute and the Eastside Institute do. Meaning it would be absolutely multidisciplinary and absolutely rather non-disciplinary, and it would have as diverse a grouping of people as possible, and it would draw upon sort of some of the advice that I was giving you in writing back to you last night. How do you make use of the best that the academy has to offer? How do you make use of that? How do you contribute to that without not contributing to making the world better?
Right.
So I think the answer is to be found in bringing people together who would never be in the university. You know what I mean? Like they have a stake in this. It's kind of the extension of the 1970s, 80s notion of, when community psychologists went into the poor communities, the Black communities, to study them, people were extremely resentful. Like, I don't have anything to do with this. I'm an object. You are studying me, and then you're telling other people what you found. And I know that Tom has, in relation to counseling, has, fought against this in some of his wonderful writings with his students of bringing the clients into the research work. So what's an extension of that? What kind of graduate program, what kind of training for PhDs or master's students in psychology do people think it would be helpful to them? I think your sound must be off or something, Barbara.
Hi.
Oh.
It just got turned on again. I was recently had the privilege of instructing a graduate student class, of which Art was part of. And it was an amazing experience in that I tried to invite a collaborative, working together, but there was still this power differential, and there was, because it was really my first on-campus class I'd done online, I was struggling with a whole new experience, but also looking into the future, what would be taking it into the community. It was multicultural, cultural influences on professional practice with counseling, psychologists in training. So thinking about the ideas that we've talked about and read about, I'm really motivated to go into the community, invite social justice into the conversation and those kinds of things. And I wonder if anybody on the call, or you could comment on what that would look like from an instructor's perspective, and also being aware that I'm working embedded in a system that is very attached to knowing in the conventional way the paradigm that we understand. That's kind of a comment, or inviting a comment, a way to add to my own understanding and knowledge, performing. I mean, being an instructor is very much a performance. So, thoughts?
My group.
Lonnie, are you on? If Lonnie is there, he might have something to say. I saw his face before, so there he is.
I'm here.
I
Hi.
mean, I don't know you well. We've never met, but just from what you write, I think you probably have some thoughts on this.
Thank you. It's definitely a pleasure to be able to attend this. I'm not really sure what to say right now. I'm just kind of listening to all any feedback from everyone. So, but thank you.
What about Tom?
Lots I could say, Lois. I mean, it's I've been embedded in it, what Barbara's talking about, and we actually just had our accreditation team here to look at our program, where there's another level to this that plays out nationally.
Yeah.
So it isn't as though we get to do whatever we want, because if we want to have our program accredited, we have to do what the Canadian Psychological Association asks of us.
Right.
So I really felt like we've had to create little spaces that Barbara's talking about, where students get to experience something other than just having a pre-formed idea of what they're supposed to do, and they actually get to experience people in process. So those are just a couple of thoughts, but I really find it difficult to navigate these ideas, which I've liked for some time, and then find ways to run into what I think is an institutional expectation that students are able to crystallize knowledge in some applicable way. So anyways, those are just some thoughts.
Yeah. Well, also this very thing you're doing now, you know, taking the responsibility to share outside of academia proper channels with your students just seems invaluable.
Yeah, we're outlaws, right? So
You're what? What?
Outlaws.
Yes, outlaws, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
You know, the other thing that I've always been, that I tried to do when I was also teaching at universities, was to let, and I'm sure that you do this, but the, that what goes on in the university is yet a particular game. It's a particular game, and I know that faculty members all over say, especially when people are doing their dissertations, you just got to learn how to play the game. When you get out, you can do whatever you want. Well, that's not true, right? As Tom was saying. But really exploring what it is to be a game, and also how many different ways there are to play it. So there's not just one way to play the game. So kind of what I was trying to say to you, Art, yesterday, or right to you. Yeah, it's really tough. It's why left to build a different kind of institution that would have much more freedom. And I am very aware that it's a very privileged position.
This is Jan from New York. I'm responding to the outlaw comment. Hello to Calgary. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Art. I wanted to say that from our side, you know, as somebody who has helped to build the Institute for many years, it was also exciting to us, Tom, to read your work and to appreciate what you were doing from within the university, particularly your therapeutic work, and then to kind of understand how we could relate to that and be responsive to that and help you to advance that. So I'm just speaking from the other outlaw side.
Yeah, partners in crime. So, thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Oh, hi, Lois. My name is Gina. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Hi. I was just thinking about, I have a question about the institutionalized way of completing a PhD or a master's. I was talking to a group of language researchers last year, and we were talking about how, you know, we're looking at beginning to move away from the conventional way of completing a PhD or a master's degree. What are your thoughts about that? Considering your, you talked about alternatives such as performing play.
Well, it does seem that, sorry, from what I can tell, and you should say how it is from your position, qualitative and performative kinds of research are becoming more and more popular. More and more organizations, more and more conferences, journals on this. So I think, I mean, the ideal thing would be for me, if I were running some kind of program and had the freedom, would be to have people be able to play with their, quote, dissertations. So you'd write one in a traditional manner, and you then totally transform it and write a play. And then maybe somebody else would take it, you know, yours, maybe Art would take, or Barbara, and then redo it in another way, so that it doesn't get institutionalized. It doesn't get to be in any manner, shape, or form you don't think it's the truth, but that it's yet another cultural artifact to play with and perhaps be of much use to people. So, as I think Barbara knows, but because she came to Discover Development New York City this weekend romp in the cultural world of New York, one of the things I have people do is create skits out of things that out of text, out of academic text, or a play or something, and or write a poem in response to something, or write a dialogue between, you know, Piaget and Vygotsky or whoever, because you get to own it that way in such a deeper sense than you get to own if you just leave it as an academic piece of writing. I don't have I mean, I know I'm saying things that sound like they take even more time than what you're doing takes, but what else can I say? You asked me, and I'm giving some suggestions.
Lois?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mary Fridley in New York.
Hi.
One of the exchanges that I was struck by, and it took place very, very, very early in the conversation online, whatever it was called. And it was with Jen Bullock from Philadelphia. And she was talking about whether or not she was concerned that so she's a group therapist, so she was talking about how she was concerned that the work she was doing with having people explore how the stories that they tell can be, equally conservatizing, blah, blah, blah. And she was saying maybe that just becomes another form of knowing. And you said, well, my answer to that would be, it is if it is, and it isn't if it isn't. So on one hand, my response was, wow, okay. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard that, but and I think, and obviously you were talking about it relative to, in a sense, what is the group doing with it? How's it being created with? But I'm also thinking, and to some extent, I guess I'm thinking about what feels like it invariably becomes a kind of pull to want to make this kind of doctrinaire. So if you're doing this, it has to be that. If it's knowledge, if it's not. But the other thing I was thinking about is how come, or it seems like that can also be heard as kind of anything goes, or a kind of liberal, well, you can just do anything because, and I know that that's not what you're talking about, but I guess I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that, because I do think it touches on what we do now, how difficult it is in a knowledge-based world to capture the kind of continuous dialectic of all this, and just in life of, how do you keep creating with it?
Well, it seems to me that the form, thank you, Mary, the form of our questioning is worth examining. Because, for example, in that exchange about the whether the therapy group in its work was doing another form of knowing, the form of the question, will that, does that, is this, will it lead to, is it just another form, da 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 da, all of those various question forms, they're knowing questions, right? They're within I need to know, or I want to know if this is going to work. I want to know the outcome of something that that there is no way to know the outcome of. So it's a wonderful example of how the knowing paradigm influences how we see and how we speak with each other. Just that exploration, like if that was explored in the group, in Jennifer's group, that would be probably, wow, what, like really a wild and crazy conversation, because people wouldn't even know how to have it, which is the basis of social therapy, in the sense that you have to create the environment without knowing how. So I think the answer, if you will, to your question of how do you keep doing that in a knowing world is to continuously play with the fact that we're living in a knowing world. To not try to reject it, to not accept it uncritically, but to continuously play with it. Yay, let's do knowing today. Let's do 10 minutes. Okay, let's do 10 minutes of as much knowing as we can and see then where we are. What did we do with that? But the consciousness that that's what you're doing is very different from doing it as just the way you've been socialized. Is that at all helpful?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, and actually it is. I like what you were saying about, because I was thinking about it relative to what Tom and I guess Barbara, who I've never met, but until now, were saying about and I often experience this in talking to people who work within traditional institutions, and obviously education is perhaps one of the more knowing ones. But I find it helpful because I never know, I sometimes feel like what's being said is I either feel kind of guilty for working within this traditional institution or not sure how to, I don't know whether you can negotiate it in any kind of way. And I think what you were saying about that you just, not just, I take that back, I hate the word just, that the playing with knowing seems very important. And I guess what you were saying about the not rejecting it, to not try to pretend in some idealistic way that we're living in or trying to create an ideal world.
Right.
You know, something like that. Like it just feels helpful as a direction for all of us because we live in the world. But I think it's very helpful.
Good.
Hi, Lois, we have a question coming in. I don't know if we want to shift a little bit. Rosie is saying, outside of academia, in this effort to work with social justice kinds of practices and issues, she notices there's not enough validated and funded activities going on since there is not a certification for many people working on this, like community workers. Can you comment on taking some of these ideas and practices into the community social justice realm?
Rosie, are you in the United States?
Yes, I'm working in Latino Health Access in California. I'm family therapist and I've been working for 4 years or more than 4 years with something that is called Promotora model, which is people from the community that get services, then they become the ones that are providing the services. Mm-hmm. And particularly, I'm working with promotores in mental health field. We call it emotional wellness since it's not, we can't call it mental health since they are not actual therapists.
Right.
But it has been very interesting how they practice. We are using narrative practices and how they know about it. It's like they already are doing those things. And when you put the name of narrative practices on it, it's like, oh, I know that I know now, right? Mm-hmm. It's what you are telling, that I've been practicing this, and now that I have the opportunity of co-supervision, collaborative supervision, and know how my work is being effective or why my work is being effective. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. But we actually we are about to publish a book that is called Recruiting the Brain, the Heart and Training the Brain, the work of promotoras, which has to do with that, with all the debate of certification. What happens if we try to certificate that common knowledge and that knowledge that many people around the world is using to improve their communities, but they don't have a certification. They are just using their common sense, their experience, mother to mother, grandma to mother, and there's no certification. And this is something that is changing the world, actually. But since there's no certification, there's not money on that. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Who's in charge of that? Who's in charge of that? Right? So that's my concern.
Yeah. Well, I do know what you mean. That's a situation that we're involved in as well. We are completely independently funded by individuals and by choice. And I kind of like it that way, even though I completely understand what you're talking about. And over the years, different people have said to us, don't you want to, do you want to trademark social therapy as a thing, capital letters? And we don't. I'll hear from someone in some country that I've never been to, never heard from the person, and they say, I'm a social therapist. And I say, that's great. Because in a way, what our approach is, you know, is very sophisticated methodologically, but it draws upon what people do, ordinary people, you know, and it's what ordinary people would do if they weren't so socialized in our cultures to be alienated, to be knowers, to be competitive, and all of those things. So it's a positive reconstruction or reinitiation into development and learning and being human with each other. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about, these different practices. And it's just it's a situation. I mean, is there a way for you to go to certification that doesn't completely distort what it is you're doing? I don't know the answer. So I don't know. I know the route we chose.
Yes, it's hard to know. But I think that at the same time is our responsibility in the academia to create more spaces to acknowledge that kind of work. Because it's funny, for instance, if we are fighting for a grant with an university, guess what? The university has more chance than us to get the grant, even if our results are amazing in terms of outreach and many things, participation and many things. But it's something interesting.
I mean, I just add to the fact that it seems important to try to get to the media, you know, because the media plays such a role, and to get to those people who are in whole political office that might listen to you, because, you know, they're like in a bubble. They'll go to universities and they'll have the same old people talking who have no new ideas and are just into it for their funding. So how do you navigate that? How do you negotiate? How do you make contacts so that you could get to meet somebody and have an actual conversation about the wonderful work? Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Can I jump in before I leave? I just want Rosie. What I'm hearing is the sort of necessity to use those affiliations and titles and certificates as tools to progress social justice. That's the theme that I'm getting from what you're doing, and my sense of it is that if you recognize that these are tools and you're being creative with them and playful with them to impart real social change, then how are you not doing something that is reflective of social justice? I mean, narrative practices themselves have a built-in use of letter writing, poem creation, certificate printing as creative outlets for the advancement of the therapeutic process, right? If taking on the role of an institution to be able to create a certificate that then subsequently plays a big role down the road is in and of itself transformative, then my sense of it is why question it, right? Yeah. I don't know if that helped at all.
I have a question that would just continuously help me. Does anyone want to comment on how Vygotsky and Wittgenstein were introduced in the book? either those of you who are familiar with either or both of their work or not at all familiar.
Hello, it's Tehera speaking.
Hi.
Hi. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to read your book because it hasn't arrived yet, but I'm familiar with Vygotsky ideas. And I'm wondering about how you connect the non-knowing stance with the proximal zone of development when he uses that concept in the educational system, and how we could actually train students with our knowledge. So it's questioning. So I guess that's one. And the other piece is about my struggle here on this not knowing situation. I'm totally interested in this concept of questioning knowing, and also the ramification of it in the past 200 years in the Western societies. But what I'm concerned about is that how far are we going to go with this questioning the knowing that we're always going to be in the context of meta narratives, that and also we're always going to be standing on other shoulders, the knowledges and experiences and knowing of others. So if you could speak into this two piece, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure, great questions, thank you. Well, there's different, in Vygotsky's work, he speaks about the zone of proximal development in many different ways. I'm just going to cough one more time. And the one that I like best is when he speaks of the zone of proximal development as a collective way of working together. So not as a zone, an expert and a novice, and the expert pushing or pulling the novice a little bit, but as a collective, a grouping of people. And in our understanding and reading of Vygotsky and looking at the work that we were doing, our group ensemble work in therapy and in schools at the time, Newman and I realized that what the zone of proximal development is best understood for us if you combine it with what Vygotsky said about his own work, his search for method, as simultaneously the tool and the result of the study. And this idea of tool and result, along with the zone of proximal development, we created this, what we call tool and result methodology. And if you look at young children, little children, before they know how to speak, you can look at it in a playful, performatory, tool and result way, that what is going on is a mother, a father, a grandmother, an older brother or sister, and a baby who does not know how to speak a language yet, but babbles, says all kinds of funny sounds, and is greatly encouraged to do so. There's a little play going on there, a little performance of pretense. The adults and the children pretend that they are being understood, and they pretend they understand the baby. Ba, 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 ba. Oh, you want your bottle. Ba, ba. To take Vygotsky's other terminology, what's going on is others are completing your thought, the baby's thought, and there's creative imitation. He speaks a lot about the importance of imitation in human development, creative imitation. So I understand what's going on there as the conversation between the, let's say, father and baby, that conversation, okay, of the babbling and the words and the babbling and the words and the relationship that's being built, that is the creating of the environment and simultaneously the product of the environment. It's the tool and the result. That you're creating the environment, and in that creating of that environment, you're creating a speaker. You're creating a relationship. You're creating development. So the closest thing that that's ridiculous to say how that's a non-knowing growing is to compare it with the ridiculous thing of you have an 18-month-old baby or a 9-month-old baby who's babbling to you, and you say, shut your mouth. Don't speak till you know how. Here's a book. Now that's ridiculous, but that's exactly what happens 5 years later when the kid goes to school. So I see the zone of proximal development in the sense of it's creating the zone and what's in the zone at the same time as a wonderful way to describe non-knowing growing.
Mhm.
Now I forgot your second question.
No, that's great. Thank you so much about this one, because I was thinking about how this could be in a way of actually constructing or reconstructing our educational system.
Yes.
That so much focus on knowing, but somehow using the zone of proximal development of, Vygotsky could actually support us to reconstruct something different without perpetuating the knowing culture. But I guess my second question was to do with, we are going to be living in this relational meta-narrative of knowing, because we are standing on the shoulder of a lot of experiences and knowledge of the past. So how much and how far are we going to question the good part of knowing? And maybe we do need to separate where knowing actually cross the line and become destructive when it's actually is transcending and transporting people to the next level of experience and knowledge.
Well, I think certainly you probably agree with me that the very destructive part is to apply knowing, to live your life with that as how you're going to navigate social relationships or problem solving. The politicians, it's not only that they don't admit they don't know something, but they manipulate us into that it's knowable when it isn't. It is not knowable. But everyone comes up with their answers. This is the right way. This is the right way. And so how do you get skilled, if you're in a position to speak to them, at inviting some questioning of that? I'm encouraged by, the drop in the bucket of the people that I and my colleagues. It's tiny drop in the bucket, but the joy and the smartness that people display when they're involved in the activity of creating the environment to question knowing, it's just beautiful. And it is. You're right. We're living in this much wider world with a meta-narrative and an ideology of knowing. And how do you live a decent, meaningful life in that. Challenging.
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions and then we wrap up. Or comments.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi there. Hi, this is Stephen Sillett here. I do a lot of work with community dialogue and drama for development work in communities. And I'm interested by, been looking a lot at the idea of inactivist approaches and distributed cognition, where meaning making is coupled to the environment. So it's not necessarily a mental representation or a picture that's stored in the brain, but it's somehow a coupled dynamic where we have got our understanding coupled to the space and place that we're in. And I think this links a bit to what you're talking about, in that when you've got this space, this proximal space, that's there's still a negotiation between how the meaning is understood in a more situated context, and when things are more sort of abstracted, the situated dimension is lost to some extent, and that is, I think that is one of the problems that we find in our work, where we're doing work sometimes in Africa, etc., is people want to have research done on people's understanding, and there is a desire for that understanding to travel. There's this very big push for universality of something, how find out the overall meaning, but there's also that idea of contextual understanding of what's going on. And I think this the liminal, the zone where you're able to work in a more living approach with theory, where you can both understand that there is some sort of conceptual framework there which is maybe universal, but it can still be kept more situated. And I sense that that's the sort of thing that's sort of coming across here. And I just wondered how you see this, the movement around inactivism and embodied cognition and that sort of thing relating to what you're talking about here, and whether that's a direction things are moving.
Thanks, Stephen. I pretty much love what you're saying. I don't, to the extent that I'm not an expert in this or at all, I am very drawn to it. I think all cognition is distributed. I don't think there is such a thing. I would also like it expanded, though, to distributed emotion. So I guess the thing I think about, though, is distributed is a little bit passive in the sense that it seems to me, and maybe I'm not understanding the word well, but that it's not the creating of new ones, you know. So, and I think that's more problematic or provocative in terms of emotions and cognition, that we do continuously, we have the capacity to, and create new, many more emotions. And yet the knowing paradigm, if you will, has us almost immediately try to identify something that is being felt and experienced and activated by people into an already existing category. Oh, that's happiness. Oh, that's this. Oh, that's that. So I don't know if distributed leaves that out or not, or it's just in.
No, I think you're right. I think distributed probably has that kind of sort of categorizing kind of sort of cause and effect is more linear. And I suppose maybe the idea of inactive is more dynamic and coupled. But I like this idea of the idea of the emotional component being still seen as a knowledge of sorts, because I think a lot of it is coupled knowledge. It's still kind of an argument about how the knowledge is understood by the person, but not necessarily what knowledge is. So I suppose this argument that knowledge is actually coupled to the environment, it's coupled to the emotions, which are to some extent maybe don't go into language, and maybe this is where you hit the problem with language, which is quite interesting, because been connecting some work around clean languages is quite interesting, which looks at processing subconscious metaphors, and that's really interesting because some things maybe can only be encapsulated by metaphor, so therefore you have that same issue because the metaphor is very contextual.
Absolutely.
And can't be, you know, yeah. So you've got this kind of, yeah, it's a struggle that's probably going to, I sense that's the struggle you're talking about, because to concretize things, you kind of maybe have to go over that threshold. But if you get over the threshold and you stay there, I don't know whether you can avoid going over the threshold, because maybe you need to in some ways document things in a fairly universal way. So I don't know whether you see what you're going to try and stay in that sort of proximal zone, or do you move over and back, and that's like your midpoint, would you say? Or
I think given the culture we live in, we always are moving out of it.
right.
And then we have to recreate it again and again and again. Yeah.
Right, got you.
I
Okay,
think
thanks very much, by the way. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. Someone, Denise, I think, has a question. I saw it written.
Sorry, I know the muting and unmuting. So my question is, but at least twofold. It's very interesting. I appreciate very much you posting your writings and also having this chat time. I work at Prescott College in Arizona with the PhD students, and we try to incorporate play quite a bit in our work and also experiential components. So I appreciate that from that point. What I'm curious about is, it seems like your feeling is we need to spend a lot of time unknowing and moving away from knowing, and that's great. My curiosity is, if we weren't moving away from knowing and we were there, what would the there look like?
Well, I think that, I don't know if this may be a cop-out, but I think that the way to get somewhere else is to play with knowing, to do knowing playfully. So meaning it's not as if we can, as I was saying earlier to Mary, I guess, we can't reject it. We're not moving to Vermont and, growing our own food and living on a commune. That's not what is being recommended. But knowing is one of the activities, a marvelous activity that human beings and cultures created. And if it got us here, but can't get us further, then we can't just throw it out, but we can transform it and its place in our lives. And my conviction is how you do that best, how groups of people and individuals do that best, is by playing with it. Perform as a knower, don't just be one. Set up a classroom where one of the playful things you're doing is performing knowing that day. When we had our school for 12 years, our kindergarten through 8th grade school, we didn't reject the New York State tests and testing of students, but we created performance of test making, performance of test taking. We not only got kids familiar with what a test is by actually making them themselves, but we had them involved in rehearsing the performance. so that when the test came, they knew it was one of the performances human beings can do, not the measure of who they are.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. I think we're winding. Is that right, Dawn?
Yes, let's wind up. And I want to thank everyone for a rich conversation. Thank you so much, Lois, for spending the time with us this week and sharing your book. I encourage everybody, we're going to leave that forum open, ongoing. So feel free to come back to that space to continue the conversation. And also, I would like to, there was quite a bit of thinking and questions about research. I want to let everybody know the Taos Institute is sponsoring and hosting a virtual conference in March 14th and 15th, and it's called Relational Research. How do we create research from a relational perspective, from a constructionist perspective? And so you can join as an individual, or you can join with a group in your location, and the information is on our website. We're going to be sending more information out about that. It is free. And so anyone is welcome to join in that relational research conversation on March 14th and 15th. It's going to be a combination of short presentations and online dialogue in the forum space on the Taos online community, and it's also going to be using our Zoom platform here for various groups. We've got hubs, which we're calling hubs, that are gathering in probably 8 different parts of the world right now. Czech Republic, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, in the US, in Canada, Puerto Rico. So it's going to be an exciting gathering to really begin to build a network around relational research. So I invite all of you to look into that. And if you have questions, just email me. I'd be happy to send you to the right link.
That sounds great, Dawn.
Yeah.
May I also make an announcement of a few things right now? Yes, so I invite everyone to my website, loisholzman.org, and to the Eastside Institute site, eastsideinstitute.org. And in particular, to take a look at the events there, to check back on mine for an updated chapter, and 2 events coming up that I think would be particularly great for this grouping of people here. One is Discover Development New York City, which is a 3-day immersion in development community, the culture of New York City, and the creating of the culture as a group in the 3 days. I limit that to 10 people, and you can see it on our site. It's sometime in May, I think the end of May. And then next, probably October or November. And usually the people who come are from 2 or 3 or 4 different countries, certainly different states, and it's quite an experience. The second is our 9th Performing the World Conference, which takes place in September. You can find that on the Eastside Institute site or performingtheworld.org. This conference, we began with the Taos Institute, actually, in 2001, did the very first one together, and the Institute has continued that over the years. This is our 9th conference, and it's a gathering of 400 to 500 people from dozens and dozens of countries who either use performance, play, the creative arts in their work with individuals or with communities on social problems, or people who are interested in that. And it's not an academic conference, but it's very rigorous and very wonderful and festive. And I invite everybody to learn about it and to submit proposals or just come and learn and grow. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Dawn and Emily, for making this possible. And it's been great talking to you, and I hope I see you. I don't know if any of you are going to be in Norway for the, what's it called? Dawn, do you know this conference?
Oh, the Learning Festival. The Taos Institute's working with a group in Norway, actually several groups in Europe, And it's a conference on education and innovations and inspirations on how we learn and grow together and how we create our educational practices and systems. So that's in Norway in April, if anybody's interested in that.
And I'll be there, so if any of you are going to be there, we can meet in person.
And again, that's a global gathering, so everyone around the world is invited. So
Great.
thank you so much. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and we'll see you online or at another event.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.